Amaze. What moon?
We want to thank Doc Skinner from 1028 Productions for sharing this incredible video of Laura Eisenhower at DisclosureCon in 2019. This presentation by Laura Eisenhower has been seen by very few until now, right here at Third Phase of Moon. Again, we want to give a big shout out to Doc for sharing this incredible insight. Enjoy, everybody. Laura Eisenhower, she's got a lot to say.
We go through all sorts of things that help us to understand who we are, what our passions are. So I add that to my resume, life experience. The best thing that I ever paid attention to. And just realizing like the deeper soul journey, particularly as an astrologer, understanding the larger picture, you know, things we might have not been able to do in previous lifetimes, things that we've been working on for quite a long time that represent something much larger than this incarnation. And you know, just where we consolidate our skill sets and abilities that usually come from what we're passionate about, and just kind of making it happen. And the soul energy, when we pay attention to the soul journey, it's above the personality matrix, which is easily controlled. So I'll get into a little bit of that. I was out of my body for about 20 years, and I was told when I went to a clairvoyant institute, which I stumbled upon. I was trying to get into an herbal school in California, but they didn't have enough applicants. And so this group of clairvoyants kind of pulled me in, said, you know, Eisenhower's here. They didn't know I was related. Like, they might know some things. Decided to stick around with them for a little while, and they could tell that I was being heavily targeted, and they didn't quite understand it. But they were like, you're not even in your body. You're channeling things to help you run your body. They're not demonic. They're very much like you. They're like your allies and friends. They're actually keeping your body alive while you're off clearing inorganic entities from wormholes. That's supposed to say inorganic. I don't know why it says organic. It's like, oh my God, what are you doing? That was a typo. But you know, just clearing junk out of creative channels, out of Stargate. And we all do this. So when we're off, like, if people are like, oh yeah, you're really out there, it's like, yeah, we're actually really busy clearing energies, doing things we don't know what we're doing. And that's what I feel things like ADD are. We're working energy on a whole other level. And so they help me to understand all of that. And, you know, this invisible weaponry on me. And I was just thinking that just something was wrong with me and trying to kind of work it out, but I started to really understand what being targeted is all about and discovered that more than likely I was pre-targeted before birth to end up on the planet Mars, which I'll talk about. So realizations and epiphanies along the way, you're pretty screwed without them when you're being manipulated and somebody's trying to push you into something you don't want to do. The hopes are that you will have realizations and epiphanies to give you that download, give you that wisdom that you need. My certifications and degrees are in science and also wilderness expedition leadership. I learned everything from nature, spent years in the wilderness and all sorts of climates, and just really was able to listen to the earth and really connect to just animals and the synchronicities that happen. You know, just seeing the mirror of what we carry inside and how, you know, the world around us responds. And when you're in the natural world, there's not a whole lot of filters or buffers or you know, things that you can easily get away with, because we're in a reward system that's asking us to do something in order to be, you know, paid for it and rewarded for it, but it might not be good for the earth. So it was a really good way to connect in deeply, and just had some great experiences with, you know, animals, even dolphins. I mean, not, well, that's an easy one. Like rattlesnakes and scorpions. You know, it's just after a while, it's like there's no fear factor anymore. Because these are all parts of our soul. The outer nature, the world around us is our soul reflected back. When we look at humanity, we're seeing a lot of different levels of archetypes and personality types, and then of course the mind control and the social engineering and the things that aren't authentic. So I researched a lot of whistleblower testimony. I came out exposing the fact that I had been recruited to go off planet. So of course, anybody talking about Mars, secret space programs, and different, you know, projects I was looking into. I wasn't thrown into a project as a child, but this was something that came later. And I'll talk a little bit about it. I don't want to spend too much time on just my own weird story. but it does, connect into something much larger, which is why it's important that we tell our stories. So cosmic mythology studies, always been into the archetypal stuff because a big portion of my path was going into the underworld, the labyrinth, the major dark night of the soul, which I realized wasn't just my dark night, it was like the dark night of the planet, the dark night of like the cosmos, the dark night of creation, just feeling like you've fallen off the face of the earth. And the only way to get back is truth and stepping up to the one and only thing that's going to allow you oxygen and breath, which is to stand in integrity and to live your truth no matter what anybody thinks. And that was, the only way to get back. And that's how I got back into my body. And just kind of one of those really ungrounded people. And this is actually grounded for me. And I know people are like, I'm the most grounded person, but a lot of us can be grounded to the earth, but are we grounded to the matrix is the other question. So, astrology, that's what I do in my day job. I go into medical astrology. I use it as a map and a tool to get us into the 0 point so we can begin to move beyond a lot of the patternings, to understand why our health is impacted, what are ascension symptoms, maybe what did we inherit, what are we working out as far as the past or ancestral patterns, things related to the energy signature we were born with, and kind of how we're navigating these times. And there's just all kinds of information. If you look at it, there's 12 houses in the zodiac, 12 signs, and we're working on restoring and awakening our 12-strand DNA. So we all carry different pieces of this map, and the more we unify, the more we come together, the more we're able to share codes and frequencies and energies and elementals to begin to rebuild and become whole again. And when that necessity is over, we're more in the embodied phase of it. Right now, we're catching up with the tree of knowledge and discovering that it's self-knowledge. Outer knowledge has been targeted with mind control and a lot of distortions, and so finding the self again is a really good way to start, to have discernment and to know what's good and what's healthy and what's not healthy. Chelantic science is something that every time I would kind of come up with something, I'd Google to see if anything else out there maybe agree, and I'd run into things like chelantic science. I got to know Lisa Renee really well. We become good friends and allies on this mission, and so some of my information comes from the Ascension Glossary and different terminologies that I've discovered on her website that help me to explain things a little bit better than maybe I would have otherwise. But then at the same time, the terminology is a little complicated and it goes over some people's heads, so I'll try and bring some clarity to the way I explain certain things. So I've just been a big dot connector my whole life. Next. So in 2006, they attempted to recruit me into a hidden operation regarding the alternative 3 colonization of Mars scenario. It was a pre-targeting before birth, I was told. So a lot of the things that I'm told I take with a grain of salt. But the reason I'm sharing it is because beyond reasonable doubt, it has made enough sense to me to feel confident in sharing it. And basically, some other whistleblowers and people that were connected to this particular Mars agenda validated that, and they knew about that in the early 70s, that they had their attention on me for whatever reason. They use looking glass technologies. These are quantum access technologies where they can go into past lives and find out information about who you are, what your mission is, and when you come in, they can have their attention on you to try and divert it, to try and control it, to try and utilize it for their own agendas and benefit. And so they were able to locate me and a partner in a previous lifetime, actually, which was interesting, and found a way to pull him into a project and set him up to be used as bait, so that when I met him and he says, yeah, we're gonna go to Mars, I'd be like, oh, I'm so in love, of course, let's go to Mars. Didn't happen like that. I didn't mean to mock that, that's not, but, I mean, that's kind of like their mentality is, they could, basically put him in a particular mindset to begin to work with what he called patrons. Now that's like a thing on the internet, right? Patrons that were giving him information about this agenda to go to Mars. And what I discovered from this group is that they were behind artificial telepathy and the My Labs that put him in that position to be getting this information not from a very authentic source, but something that had an agenda to steer humanity into an Armageddon artificial timeline while it took care of them, to give them the technologies and the condos on Mars and whatever they wanted to create their new world order, basically. And that's what I discovered. as I was being approached and convinced that going to Mars would be a good idea. So of course the story is really long. Eventually there'll be, a book that explains some of it. But I was aware as a child that, ever since I was little, I knew what I was here to do, and it was definitely all about this Mother Earth. And I was being somewhat prepared from my own, consciousness and other allies and guides that this particular window period that we're in right now would be incredibly crucial, and that no matter what, to stay real connected to myself, to the Earth, and basically like, good luck. So I've always connected to the Venus energy. I have a predominance of, that planetary energy. Like, I'm basically all Venus, Pluto, Scorpio. So I really connect to the whole Venus journey. And I found it interesting that I was contending with Mars, because we think about, men are from Venus, women are from Venus, men are from Mars. Well, let's do it the other way around too, because if we're going to integrate polarity, we might as well identify with both. But what I was starting to, see this kind of story as is, how can we turn the solar plexus into something that is based in the heart? Because if all this craziness is playing out, there's a hidden Mars agenda, and there's Venus transits, which the Mayans understood, aren't these energies that should become one? Isn't this like traits of the masculine and feminine? Isn't this something we're working to rebuild? And when we look at it, like the Venus energy, there's a lot of astral parasites connected to our heart chakra because of the imbalance on the planet of the masculine and feminine and just polarity in general. Our hearts are somewhat broken, whether we want to admit it or not, because a lot of thefts have taken place in our history connected to who we really are and what we're made of, which we're rediscovering. But the Mars energy just being a hidden agenda that has something attached to it that could potentially compromise us, well, that's the nature of Mars, the warrior. But the negative octave of Mars would be self-serving, aggressive, and dominating. So every planetary body has different octaves and vibrational levels. So when we look at how we relate to every planet, we want to understand, are we on the shadow side of that planetary consciousness? And if we are, we might notice that we're working our way up into a more conscious expression of it. For example, Neptune's shadow would be addiction, delusion, and feeling really, really lost and confused and bewildered. The highest level of Neptune is being connected to multidimensional energy, the creative imagination, and musicians and artists tend to have a very strong affinity with Neptune. And the reason I'm not throwing in Saturn just yet is because I will later, so let's go to some other planet before we get to Saturn. So anyway, somebody wrote me recently, and I decided to add it into the slide, that Eisenhower was briefed, and I knew this before, that a bunch of individuals called light lifes, which pretty much I would say all of us are, would be coming in. And so particularly he was told that a light life would be gifted to the family line from the Guardians to assist in the planetary awakening. And there's a numerous amount. And I think I was going to put a little bit more work into that particular slide to explain it a little bit more. But a light life basically would be what maybe some call like a star seed, or somebody who is coming in from a different sort of dimensional level or awareness in order to help switch the lights on. Because there's no such thing as hierarchy when it comes to spirit or when it comes to the unified field. But some people are very tasked with their missions. They get smacked around real early to, wake up and get connected in order to, assist and pretty much have no other focus. And it doesn't matter when that hits, whether we're a kid, whether we're in our 60s, 70s, whether we're a teenager, it doesn't matter. And we might have discovered or found in our lives that it comes and goes. We might have these epiphanies of, oh yeah, that's what I'm here to do, and then the big tide of matrix BS, kind of like overrides it, and we can get knocked off center. So I would consider that every single human on this earth has the potential, but some are tasked with, you can't get away with any other kind of lifestyle or existence but this. And that becomes a part of the gift, is that, the conscious focus is, and it becomes life or death. It's like the conscious focus has to be there, and if it's not, you're going to be in life-death scenarios. And it's not like it's not the same for other people, but some just aren't ready, So if you look at, everything ends up being like a wilderness metaphor. So if you're an expedition leader, you need to hold the hand of the slowest hiker. Not because they're slower or incapable, but because there's just like a child. That child could be even more advanced than the one that's guiding it in life. But the whole deal is that we're working together, and that for whatever reason, if something's struggling and kind of like in the back, that the expedition leader doesn't just go, okay, see ya, I'm over here. It's like we go and we say, we hold the hand and we walk together. And in walking together, some of the injuries might be similar, you know, like we drag each other off a cliff together, woo! So what? And sometimes it's the expedition leader's fault. It doesn't matter, because we're all one and it's all unified. So really, when we're dealing with each other, we're dealing with aspects of ourselves. Integration of polarity, integration of all these fragments due to exploded planets. We're all just facing pieces of ourselves. So I don't like to designate roles. I don't even know why I put that in there, but it just was sent to me recently that he was briefed that you know, this would happen. I think it was right after I was being massively trolled and had a death threat. I'm like, oh, cool. So I put it in there, but not to be like, oh. Anyway, next slide. So alternatives 1, 2, and 3 are something that was established in the Eisenhower administration. When President Eisenhower was in office, he commissioned a secret society known as the Jason Society in 1955, which is considered to be a branch of MJ-12. Now there's a lot, thank you. I don't even know how to open these. That's why I never get them at the store. And this gum, sorry, it's like really pleasant, but, so I know there's a lot of history before this. The reason I'm jumping just to this particular phase in history is because this has to do with alternatives 1, 2, and 3 that connect to Mars. So there's a lot that leads up to it, but he commissioned this secret society considered to be a branch of MJ-12 because MJ-12 was already dealing with things like alien technology and things related to what took place during the Second World War, the establishment of certain 3-letter organizations in order to maintain some level of control over what was going on between ETs and humans. And so when he stepped into office, it was a very confusing thing because what was being presented to the governments was these alternatives. They made a movie about Alternative 3 that never really went anywhere. It was considered fiction, but it's about potential doomsday scenarios and what we should do as a human race, which makes sense in order to be prepared. But it's a whole other thing when these agendas have been infiltrated and it's not for the good of all, it's only for the good of some, and some of these well-intentioned plans didn't end up remaining in that way. So Truman established MJ-12 while in office. Other researchers might not agree and say that it didn't happen quite that way. I don't know, I don't have the absolute proof, but the whole point is MJ-12 was established. And when you got like things working behind the scenes, using their leaders as, you know, puppets, you know, this was already like very much the cabal, very much Illuminati driven in order to control secret space programs and timelines. Because if you can control timelines, if you can control the mind of humanity, then they can, you know, create a future that benefits them while robbing our creative energy and our creative power and our creative imagination to harvest and battery up their negative technologies to create this false matrix that we've been in. So a lot about this ascension is calling that energy back, activating those dormant strands, and figuring out what are they hooking into? What is the strategy that they're using to take our life force, take our imaginations, and take our creativity to present it to us in a way where we buy into it, and if we don't buy into it, we fear it. And when that happens, our creative channels are infected and we actually enable the things that we don't want. So it's very important that we can step back, take a breath, and align to the organic ascension timeline, which is a completely different scenario than any of this. And that's what I was really aware of as a child, that this is the potential for humans, and there was just no way that I could allow myself to be in agreement to anything but that. So the Jason Scholars were created to sift through all the facts, evidence, technology, lies, and deception, and find the truth of the alien question. Well, the whole sifting through the lies and deception, we're still sifting through, didn't go so well. Especially when people start to get murdered, threatened, and there's, you know, technologies that, you know, can beam, you know, weaponry, you know, on a person. I've had psychotronic weaponry on me my whole life. And it wasn't until I was able to get a break from it and be in nature that I was like, oh, so this is what it's like to actually, you know, not feel that. So next slide. So the first alternative is about the use of nuclear devices to blast holes in the stratosphere from which heat and pollution could escape into space. Some people say that's what the ozone hole is and that they already attempted to do that. I don't know if that is why that is an ozone hole or if it's just for other reasons. The second aims at building a network of underground cities and tunnels of which mankind's selected elite could survive. The third deals with a secret space colonization program on Mars with the same purpose. Of course, it's not just Mars, but it's all about colonization, you know, off planet. And Phil Schneider mentioned there are about 131 deep underground military bases in the USA. Others have mentioned 4,000 worldwide. Next. Morgan Martell discusses on his website about Project Paperclip. So, you know, if you notice me jumping around, it's sort of like just to take in some of these names or projects or things. It's like, okay, Jason Scholar, okay, MJ12, okay, Project Paperclip. I'm sure a lot of people are already familiar with most of this. But this happened in 1947, before the Jason Scholars, before the different alternatives. But this was sort of like what led to the infiltration, is after the Second World War, Nazi scientists and doctors and psychologists, and just, you know, their what one could consider the minds of, you know, society with this, you know, agenda connected to it, would come into the United States. So one purpose of this operation was to inhibit post-war Germany from redeveloping its military research capabilities. One of the fields the Nazi doctors and psychologists had made advances in was that of social and behavioral engineering in humans, also known as mind control. So that's, you know, one of the biggest tactics, obviously. And when we see like the money system, that's an example of our harvested energy, which is being given, you know, back to us in a form of currency, which presents a choice to us. Are we going to be selfish with it? Are we going to be hoarding with it? Are we going to use it for our own means? Are we going to like see the responsibility in having resources in order to make the world a more beautiful place, in order to redirect the currency into where it belongs, into the dark spots, into the injustices, into those that are starving and hungry and need clothing? I mean, there's no bigger priority than that. And so nothing makes sense until that's addressed. And so, yeah. It has been said by the whistleblower of M16 that the CIA was created almost 2 years after Project Paperclip, and after this in the American National Security Act of 1947, to handle the massive number of mind control, cloning, and other covert projects that were born from Paperclip. MJ12 was also created as a group dealing in ET investigations. So this is all leading up to the Mars thing. The reason I shared about alternatives 1, 2, and 3, because I wanted to first introduce the fact that that was a huge part of my path, was coming up against these Mars folks. And this is, yeah, some of the things that were leading up to having this presented. It's almost like they're warming them up. Okay, now we'll offer some solutions for the potential that humans aren't going to make it. So when we look at the fear about climate change, yes, there are real threats out there. But if we keep externalizing spirituality, if we keep externalizing our health and wellness, if we keep externalizing everything, yes, there are threats. But those threats can be solved from doing the work within. And that's what Ascension is all about. What is up with this junk DNA? What is up with our dormant strands of DNA? What about our galactic chakras? Why are we just looking at the news fearing something when we haven't even begun to discover ourselves? Wouldn't that be the solution? Since we're made of the same substance, since we are a microcosm of the Earth and cosmos, our DNA is a replica of the Earth grids, our chakras are holding the energy of all the different dimensions that exist in this time matrix. Wouldn't it make more sense if we put the attention on ourselves than be constantly fighting something or battling something to the point where it puts us in fear, and we delegate leaders to solve the problem that let us down or disappoint us? And I'm not saying that the current leadership is doing that either, but I'm just saying, you know, we can't just put it all on one person. You know, we have to take the responsibility, knowing that Ascension is an initiation, it's an inner shift, and we're being taken advantage of, like, how that feels and what we go through, you know? Even to the point where some of the positive messages can shame things like depression or anger, when I think it's a healthy response to all the BS. But we don't want to remain there, just like we don't want to stay in fear. We want to use it as a way to ask ourselves questions. What is on the other side of that element? If depression is connected to emotions, and that's a water element, what's on the other side of it? What is it trying to tell us? Because everything that sucks, or everything that hurts, or everything that we struggle with, the other side of that coin is our mission, is our purpose, is our calling, is our responsibility, and is something that we have to step into. Because all these kind of things that get real complex are just trying to get in the way, And then use the planetary energies, right? So if there's a hidden Mars agenda, there's something going on with our solar plexus that we need to look at. Where are we buying into something outside of us? What are we giving our power away to? And how have we been rewarded for going along with it by putting our creative energy into something that's not healthy? And so we have to ask ourselves, how are we using our power? Because there's a sneaky agenda in the works if we don't begin to wake up what we're actually agreeing to, these hidden unconscious contracts. So, next slide. So by the time Eisenhower stepped into office, the draconian system had already infiltrated the 3-letter organizations, and eventually defense-related projects got infiltrated as technology exchanges took place, and it wasn't easily monitored. So when you start to see things like draconian system, what the hell is that? I'm going to get into it. So I'm kind of like introducing something that will be further explained. So as confusing as some of it might sound, I'm going to start to go into the origins of it, how that relates to us. But the whole deal is that a draconian system infiltrating these organizations that are supposed to help run the show through being in service to humanity absolutely has not been in service to humanity. It's been in service to self, using us. And a lot of it is out of fear. A lot of it is because they compromise their own connection to source and rely on us in a vampiric way to continue a life cycle. And that's what some of these dark technologies are about, is if it's AI, if it's transhumanism, if it has to do with reversal energies that harvest, it's to feed them so that they can maintain the matrix system. And so we just have to be wary of how that game is being played. Okay, next slide. So alternatives 1, 2, and 3 are 3 agendas recommended by adjacent society scholars and are related to different scenarios to prevent a possible future doomsday that is more than likely induced and not natural. So when they presented the idea of going off to Mars, and I met this person, and it was, oh yeah, of course he's familiar because you found us in a past life and you're manipulating him to take me to Mars. So of course I had a natural affinity with this person, and I didn't really know as much as I do now about him having a handler, him having this my lab experience, and him being put on a mission to pull me in. And so about 9 months after him and I got married, well, it was a Celtic marriage, a year and a day. So that was like, ooh, a year and a day, I don't think we can do this. After about maybe 6 to 9 months of being together, he said, well, I have to confess to you that you're a mission. I was sent to find you, you were tracked. And when I met him, I thought it was just somebody who wanted to go to Mars, and I was his girlfriend, so he was going to invite me to come with him, and I could easily say no. Because the more I said no, the more threatening it became. And he said, well, they're going to take you anyway, you don't have a choice, and you're a mission. And so I was like, well, okay, how romantic. It's just kind of like putting a little bit of a poker in my love bubble. But my thing was, I got to convince him to stay. I got to convince him to see what they're doing. And so I researched and researched. I went down so many rabbit holes, and I realized that the people that were connected to the recruitment were connected to psychotronic weaponry, were connected to my labs, were connected to gang stalking and all these different tactics, even artificial telepathy. And so then I began to figure it out. But when I first did research on them, there was no information. They had wiped all the information. And I had to go through like the Paul Benowitz case and a bunch of other things and followed a bunch of leads until I found a connection between the aviary, which is what they're called, their names, and some of these tactics to mess with people's head and make them the crazy ones when they're dealing with the whole phenomenon of ET and UFOs. So he was dealing with those guys. And so the best thing I could do for my research is get rare earth magnets and try and drop him on where I thought he was maybe implanted to shift the frequency. I tried to get him into water to have conversations with me because he would leave for days and not remember. And they were gonna, and it was just one layer after another of not giving up. And some of the preparation when I was younger really helped. Also being a mother, because when you're a mom, it's like you're like the eagle. Anybody messes with the nest, I'm gonna bite your head off. So I had that extra bit of oomph to deal with all that. So what was coming into me, sort of the downloads coming into me, they're like, no, this is for your protection. And we're gonna get on Mars around 2012 because all this stuff is gonna happen, this event's gonna take place, these disasters are gonna happen, and this is for your protection. And I'm like thinking, because I know about geoengineering and chemtrails and HARP and how they can engineer superstorms, and I'm thinking, why would we have to be evacuated off of Mother Earth? I don't really think, this seems induced, because we do have these kind of technologies that can induce Armageddon timelines. So we're running from something that's been engineered. So that really gave me that real inner knowing that there's no way I'm gonna go along with this. Because any kind of doomsday scenario, first of all, I'm happy to just have the doom, if the caldera is going to blow and Montana's going to be wiped out where I live, including a bunch of other states, I just told my husband, just make sure you're hugging me so when the mold is left, when the ash blows away, we're in like a hug. It's like, death, what's the big deal? But like giving my power away to something like this, ain't gonna happen. Because our tax dollars and so much more has been going into feeding these sort of things without our awareness or knowledge. And that is completely unfair and out of integrity as far as the human race is concerned. That's no leadership, it's absolutely corrupt. And so it all began to make a lot more sense as time rolled on. Next slide. So alien and advanced technology was hidden by the power elite and taken off planet, which fell into the hands of corporate greed and power mongers. The same human and non-human entities who succeeded in take over control of the planet are those which broke up these main organizations into several breakaway civilizations. And that's from Lisa Renee, who connects with the Guardians, and a lot of information about the different dark agendas, but also a lot of the really, really positive stuff. And so this is exactly what I was saying with this Mars agenda. Like, all very hush-hush, you can't say anything to anybody. And of course, here I am, like, and this is the whole deal with what we're seeing. We're given our phones, our iPhones, our Androids, whatever. The toilet flushes for us. It's like, thanks guys, very advanced technologies. No cures for most of the stuff that we're dealing with. And we hear about all these, advanced technologies. We see them in sci-fi movies, and they got their hands on it, and it's in existence. I mean, we're in the future. We're just as much in the past. Everything is open. Everything is there. But where are we on the timeline? Where are we in our consciousness? And what can we begin to discover in order to not allow ourselves to be duped and deceived? Just like we wouldn't want that in a partner. We're in a partnership with everything. So if we're dealing with a mate like that, or a loved one, a partner, if somebody we marry or couple up with, would we want deception? Would we want to be lied to and betrayed? Would we want to play along with the facade because it's more comfortable? No, I mean, eventually that cracks and it expires. And so this is where we are right now as a humanity. Enough is enough. And everybody's in their different phases of their growth periods, but I think we all know it's really hard to not see fake news be disseminated and broken down, and a lot of more information coming to the surface for people to ponder instead of just going for whatever they hear, which is controlling the narrative. Next slide. So on Zeta Top website, it says that those connected to Alternative 3 are service to self Zeta Grays. Of course, there's more positively inclined Zeta Grays. There's positive and negative in any race. So anytime I bring up a particular group, it doesn't mean that I think they're all negative. I'm just focusing on a portion of it in order to kind of, push a point home, I guess. So through much programming, they have managed to convince many well-intentioned people that it was not in our best interests to move off planet. That it was in our best interest to move off planet. And behind the scenes, a catastrophic timeline is purposely being created to thin out the population and begin the creation of a transhumanism world. So, like I said, through much programming, they have managed to convince well-intentioned people that it was in our best interest to move off planet. The partner that I was dealing with at the time felt like a hero. He felt like, they put me in this great position, I'm saving you and others, and he wasn't quite getting the information of the ramifications because of compartmentalism. You can't convince somebody to do something if you're going to tell them the deeper agenda or dark agenda behind it. You want to keep them compartmentalized so that you can just give them what they would want to hear, to give them the inspiration and motivation to pull something off. While they're kind of like, kind of orchestrating it like a director of a movie, this goes here, this goes there, and it's a need-to-know thing. It's a need-to-know thing. Okay, next slide. So I declined to go to Mars because I believe in the power of the human spirit. I could also sense that something was not right about the recruitment. That's why I did so much research. I just wasn't going to quit. And I had actually a dream that was very, very lucid and obvious, because I was getting taken up by chains into a ship. A voice from the sky said, you have to make a choice right now between going with them. They're going to control you. This is kind of what's going on. Or you can stay on Earth. And I said, well, of course I'm going to stay on Earth. I plunged down into the ocean. I could feel the cold of the ocean. And I saw the ship begin to disappear, and I was like, well, I got to bring my partner back down. They're like, no, he's not going to come with you. And I was like, well, did I make the right choice? I need him, we've got a great sacred union on the planet. Because that was like my obsession as a kid, like sacred union, alchemical marriage, and all these things connected to hierogamic union that the ancient cultures used to understand, and how that impacts the earth grids and humanity. It's what keeps things healthy, because we're a part of this creation. Man, I go off on tangents, but anyway, so I tried to fly back up to get him, trying to bring in lightning and thunder. It was impossible, and I just plunged back down. And then this light in the sky just began to illuminate, and the planet started to do these alignments saying, we all have to just be patient, because eventually, the blossoming of Earth ascension and the blossoming of human consciousness is going to happen. It's inevitable. And so patience, patience, patience. And so I just crawled up to the shore, and I just noticed all this stuff, and I was at peace with the fact that that ship had left. But then I wake up in the morning, he's laying next to me, and I'm like, oh, I just had this crazy dream. And this was like way early on in the whole thing, and I started to tell him, he's like, you don't want to tell me this, you don't want to tell me this. It created a lot of panic, because we were bugged, they could hear everything. They were like, we don't have her, we lost her, and she said the dream, and everything changed from that point on. That dream actually really anchored and grounded it. So anyway, this is the group who are involved. They're called the Aviary. It's a collection of strange birds. They're a group of key scientists, military men, and intelligence agents who share an intense interest in UFOs, telepathy, remote viewing, parapsychology, mind control, and the creation of psychotronic weapons. Now, much of this stuff, as far as intense interest, is awesome stuff. I mean, we all dabble in this sort of research: telepathy, UFOs, remote viewing, parapsychology. But it's the mind control and the psychotronic weaponry, because if they know how the mind works, if they know, about our greater abilities, and they have the ability to use weapons in order to throw off our nervous system or create frequency modulations and distortions, which is what a lot of these dark technologies have been doing for thousands of years, but just they keep upping it and shifting it accordingly based on where we are in the timeline. It becomes incredibly dangerous. And so you can actually Google it if you ever want to know more about these guys. The Aviary, just put in the name John Alexander in the Aviary, and you'll get a picture of him and the whole deal. That didn't come out until 2010, which was years after I broke out of it. There was nothing that was validating what I was feeling the need to pull out of, and nothing that was connecting these guys to this group until some people did their research and discovered this. And I was like, phew, because it made me feel a lot better that I made the right choice. And yeah, so the Aviary and John Alexander, if you Google that, you can find out more. So next slide. So Eisenhower is a part of the creation of the secret space programs, but without his leadership, many failing organizations had no accountability to their actions, and infighting between the organizations spread. This continued lack of transparency and continued deception going on between these world powers spread corruption, greed, mind control, and horrific crimes against humanity. And again, that's from Essential Glossary with what Lisa's bringing in, and that, absolutely. You can't put somebody in a position of being president and expect them to be able to run the secret space programs, multiple secret space programs. There's many, many levels. And some are not wanting humanity to thrive at all. So they are a part of certain secret space programs. So what do you do when they, put plants and they start to infiltrate, they start to mess with the minds and convince well-intentioned people to do something? Then whatever did hold integrity and was looking out for the human race is questionable, and it's not on a very strong foundation. Now, I'm sure there's some, like maybe Solar Warden, who has been able to hold a strong ground. But to me, we're learning about our multidimensional body. I'm not into externalizing anything. So anything that I share, I feel is a part of this greater alchemy we're going through as humans in order to realize a much larger picture that we're connected to: our consciousness, our ego, our nervous system, our DNA, and our chakras, or whatever else I might have missed. Our organs, our bones, our hair, our fingernails, everything. The lines on our toes, the lines on our hands, the patterning in our eye. We're a living map and oracle of everything. We hold the whole story of creation. And even our dumbed down DNA tells the story of what we've gone through and what we're rehabilitating. So anyway, it wasn't able to be monitored, and they knew that this was the best tactic. Because the thing is, when you're like the cabal and you're working in alliance with other entities, you're able to kind of be strategic in where you put things, whereas when you're a human, you wake up, you can only really deal with what's coming at you. And you can plan something in your calendar, or be told you have to go to a meeting or do a speech. But it's a whole other thing when you're seeing all this and then they show up and there's contact, and that contact is somewhat manipulated. So go to the next slide. So in some of my presentations, which I'm not going to get into, I go into the origins of these ET government treaties that go back to 1926, 1933, much more UFO crashes than we've heard about, Roosevelt's administration, Aleister Crowley, Winston Churchill, and Hitler. And this isn't just the Greada Treaty that we might Google when we want to learn about ET government treaties that basically only brings up Eisenhower. And that's what I used to just present about. It's like, okay, well, that's all I'm getting. But I'm like, there's more. I know that that's not the full story. There's so much more. And fortunately, years later in my research, I do presentations that are much more vast about that. But that's not really the topic. The topic of this talk really has to do with us, because I think that's really important. There's so much information out there anyway. There's enough rabbit holes for all of us to jump in. So they have condos on Mars. We got like rabbit warrens with all of us just sitting in there eating our carrots, like, holy shit, what's going on? So anyway, there are natural cycles when the stargates open called the stellar activation cycle. We're currently in this window, and that is why many talk about ascension. There's different ascension cycles. So people define it differently. At times I don't quite resonate with the way I feel it's defined, but to each their own, of course. I can only share though what resonates with me, and if it resonates, great. If it doesn't, allow it to take you wherever you want to go and to let it activate what your own truth is, because we are not necessarily going to think the same. And we are like an ecosystem and the web of life. We have differences, and that's great, because if we can harmonize our differences, then we can be one. If we try and all become the same, then we're only repeating an old paradigm model, and that's a control mechanism. So we got to accept, our differences. We view reality differently. There's multiple dimensions, so the way we experience things is not necessarily going to be the same. But if we can get enough foundational things going, it can trigger something to help us to get closer to ourselves. And that's my only goal, is for every individual to feel closer to themselves, not to just think that I'm trying to shove anything down anybody's throat, like, oh, this is the way it is, and this is the absolute 100% truth. This is just what is resonant enough for me to feel comfortable about sharing, and what has helped me. And it goes into some universal things that I feel are truths, but again, it really depends on the individual. The body's a great determinator. If you feel the constriction or you feel the expansion, just like we feel that with people. Next slide. So when the Cradle of Lyra was destroyed in the Lyran Wars with the Draconian Orion group, this is when the destruction of the Avatar higher level of consciousness took place. The Orion group are a predator force with a predator mind, which is mainly responsible for creating much of the negative ego in humanity through mind control programming. Higher races were seeded to eventually win the war over this, but have been heavily targeted as we see in the world today. So one of my redundant things that I like to say is we win the war within because it's a war on consciousness, and we have to win the war within because we're the ones that are being compromised or pushed to choose sides, pushed to live out of balance, encouraged to only see one way and negate the rest. And so what does that cause? It causes chaos amongst all of us. We can't get along. You can lose a friend so easily just saying one word, in a non-harmful way, just because if somebody doesn't agree, she's like, get out of my life. It's like, so we're really just only in war with ourselves, and we play it out kind of experiencing that with each other. And so this is what certain religions, not all religions, and politics, and even things in the media, not all media, but the dark side of all of it is just to pull us out of ourselves so that we lose connection with ourselves, and it's just something that we're grappling with as an outer issue to solve, to win, to conquer, instead of something we're reconciling within ourselves in order to emit a frequency that can help to activate and switch on dormant strands of DNA. Because that's where we're all equals. The way we express it is where we are all very unique. But that's why the hierarchical system is a load of crap. And it relies on negative ego constructs in order to create the different levels. How much are you willing to play the game? How much are you a victim to it because you're not willing to play the game because you won't be taken care of? And so almost like that whole thing is very similar to how we're restoring the tree of life from the tree of knowledge, which was targeted with mind control. The true thing, and I think I already said it, is self-knowledge. What are we truly made of? If we keep externalizing it, we're going to keep chasing our tail. So my theory as to why we were attacked by this draconian group, even in the higher levels of 11 or 10, 11, 12, the higher density avatar consciousness, is because we're in a free will universe. When the masculine and feminine began to differentiate it opened up a portal for a warring race to come in. Just like when we're out of balance, we might notice predatory energies coming closer to us. And I'm not saying that anybody asks for it if it happens at all, because we should all have each other's back and not take advantage of us when we feel broken or vulnerable. So it's not like, well, you know, that's just the law of physics. No, that's the law of being in it. But anyway, as we come back into balance and unity, it just doesn't give any room for this stuff to feed. Similar to, you know, fighting cancer, it can't exist in an inhospitable environment for its growth. And there's a lot of amazing things going on here as far as really great ways to heal from all sorts of things. But anyway, so the differentiation continued, and then exploded planets take place. The galactic wars resulting in hybridization, manipulation of incarnate consciousness, and creating belief systems to disconnect us from zero-point unified field, which eventually separated us from Andromeda galactic core, and we became a fallen Milky Way galaxy. And the galactic cores of the Milky Way and Andromeda split. And so we've only been in the 7 chakra system when really we have way more than that. And we've only been almost cycling in it based on the fact that some of these distortions have made it really difficult to move on past the 7. Now the 7 is great. The 7th chakra is very important. But if it's plugging into somebody else, if there's some sort of distortion, it makes it very difficult to move on. The thing is, a lot of us move way beyond the 7. We just don't know. It's not like a little alert goes off, you're in number 8. But I mean, we go there all the time. We go into the 0 point all the time. What we're taught, though, is a whole other thing, which holds kind of an energy. And anyway, so 7 connects to the planetary logos, and the distortions of the stargates make those gates hard to move through. And because of all the damage and the wars and the cataclysms, it's like an injury that needs to be healed. For that alignment to happen again, for the energy center to be able to spin again. So I think I'm going off on a lot of tangents, but let's go to the next slide. So, okay, here's a way to kind of look at it. Ascension Glossary, I highly recommend. So you got chakra 10, 11, 12. This corresponds with our DNA as well. The 10 is solar star chakra, dark blue, and actually the 10th gate has been compromised on Earth, because the stargates on Earth, the reason they're compromised is because they hold a connection to the higher dimensional levels. So if 10 is entering the avatar consciousness and the 10th gate on Earth is being messed with, just like the 13th has been, which connects us to the 0 point, this shows us that we're born into this world, and through osmosis we pick up those blocks and those blockages. So what happens down here on Earth as far as what they block doesn't give us access to the rest of ourselves, and that circulation is cut off. And that's why we've had cycles of war, dark cycles of disease, epidemics, engineered epidemics, and the use of weaponry and technology in order to keep us, really, dumbed down, which symbolically is like the inverted pentagram, which is what these dark groups, tend to use as their symbolism. And despite these groups, the symbolism of it is that the 5th element, ether, is going into the ground. So our ability to connect with what's, beyond and have it circulate through our body is compromised and limited. Because if our belief systems are going over here and over there, and we can't just be authentic and recognize that naturally we're just spiritual beings, that energy circulation is somewhat cut off. Now there's certain things that are going to help us to get on track that have been important for us, no doubt. But some things, have a level of trickery. And a lot of times it's not about the groups as much as it's about certain individuals that aren't in alignment with certain teachings. And lots of teachings have been distorted. We could go on and on. But so the cradle of Ira was the first major sort of explosion. And 10, 11, 12, that was the highest, higher level of our DNA capacity and openness in our chakra system to connect to the Trinity, which is the 0 point, and 14, 15, 15 representing the Father Ark, 14 representing the Christ Sophia child. So the reason the number 13 is so significant on the planet right now is because it's the neutron window that connects us back to Andromeda to begin to heal our DNA, upgrade our DNA, and begin to ignite these galactic chakras. And so the reconnection with the Mother is because it's been so targeted. We've had a huge theft as a humanity and a disconnect from the mother energy and the father energy, of course. But the response to that was program men to treat women like this, teach them how to cut themselves off of their own feminine energy, their own emotions, because obviously we have masculine and feminine within us. But because that gets tricky and it can be taken advantage of as a movement, as far as the way we relate to gender, it's electric and magnetic. It's beyond gender, it's beyond sexual energy. It's just to create an imbalance in order for the Kundalini, though, not to run. And that's why the dragon lines connected to the earth are very much in this lower octave of reptilian, which also connects to the issues with Mars and even Pluto. Oh, fudge. Okay. Thank you. So in our DNA, it's all broken up into different harmonic universes. Just like the 5-pointed star, you have harmonic universe 4, but the 5th, which is that 5th element, which is that really what we've been looking to return to. That's why one of my books that I'm going to put out is called Return of the Cosmic Ether. The 5th is actually the Trinity, which is the 5th harmonic universe. And this corresponds to our DNA, and I'll get into more detail about that. Next slide. So the Draconian Orion group are also referred to as black suns. The black suns have reversed their DNA. It is a reverse 10 DNA strand. And because of that, the 10th gate, which has been manipulated, when we start to go into 10, we stop. So we can't fully connect to the avatar consciousness, and what happens is we feel a sense of defeat. This happens in our 8th and 9th chakra too. The way they've compromised the stargates and the way they use technologies and belief systems and propaganda to keep us from being able to initiate into these higher levels, that reversal is a way to be a gatekeeper, because that reversal energy keeps the circulation blocked, so that when we want to connect to the avatar consciousness, which could also be called Christ consciousness, it's really kind of hard to get there. We might bump into something which is the way that they've taught us to understand Christ or Jesus, the way they've taught us to feel about ourselves. Like, oh, no, you got to sit and talk to a priest and confess all your sins, right? So as we begin to enter that zone, we're not taught the alchemy. We're not taught of the process of ego death to rise and ascend in our own being, to be Christed beings, to have that alchemy take place. We're limited. And so this reversal keeps us from that epiphany and realization. Even though we can override it and find a way to work around it and give ourselves the time and space to have those epiphanies and realizations of, wait a second, maybe I shouldn't be listening to that. Maybe that's not where the truth lies. And it's through falling down on our face and getting back up again. It's through getting sick. It's through getting injured. It's through getting hurt. It's through adversity that we can deprogram ourselves very often. But of course we don't see it as such, because that's a part of the program that we judge ourselves. Oh, it's a misfortune, it's a failure. But it's a way for us to bust through what might seem to be positive. Because, of course, like, marriage is positive. Oh my God, you just did something terrible, or she did something terrible. Or wow, I really believed in the church, and like, wow, we find out about these young kids that are being messed with. Or something in politics or even the entertainment industries of pedophilia and these dark rituals and all these things that masquerade behind these facades that need to come out, so that we can experience the good message that a lot of it had without the infiltration and get that full circulation. Because once we have the epiphany and we've arrived at that circulation level, there's no turning back. But our growth is constantly stunted, and so we keep spinning. It's like we feel like we make progress and we start at ground zero again. And then we're taught, like, oh yeah, you just don't know what it means to be spiritual. And then it's like, and then it's very easy to just go to 7-Eleven and get blah, blah, blah. Just like, screw this. So anyway, so we can activate 12 strands and beyond, and they're trying to keep us from this. They have a hierarchical system. Earth-based reptilians appear to be in command over EVE, or biological entities known as small grays. They access limited levels of biological immortality through the vampirism and siphoning of other living things, such as the planet Earth, and the way we see the other planets when their shadow elements are being promoted, whether it's through television, media, commercials, government policies, you name it. The list is long. How to send us the distorted vibrational energies from these different planets, instead of us experiencing how to initiate and graduate into the higher levels of those expressions. Once we do that, and once we get over some of the patterning that we've been taught to handle in a way that isn't true to who we are, then we release ourselves from the wheel of necessity. The whole deal with the astral chart is it's a map. But some of those patterns, we have a choice. Are we going to go the matrix way? Are we going to go the programmed way of how to solve this challenge, or how to work through this challenge? Or are we going to go to ourselves? Are we going to go to nature? Are we going to go outside and meditate? Are we going to walk barefoot? Are we going to, journey into the heart of Mother Gaia and just look at the beautiful birds and the flowers? I mean, that right there is an activation, but instead it's like we have an initiation, like with Uranus that wants to wake us up, feel like we're having a nervous breakdown, call the doctor up and get some meds. That's what humans do. They misunderstand these initiations. They think there's something terribly wrong, going crazy. Or the Pluto comes along to throw them into a transformation cycle. I'm freaking dying, or I want to die. You're depressed, you need to go on anti-depression things. Side effect, coma, rectal bleeding. So it's just like, no, it's an initiation. So we're supposed to get really, really sick for trying to take care of one thing instead of just organically move through it, knowing that these are good signs of growth. The thing is, we feel like victims when we feel like we didn't ask for the pain. If we ask for the pain, then we feel like, ooh, we're gaining strength, we're gonna climb that mountain. Yeah, it hurts, but signed up for it. If it comes out of left field, it's just like, what is that? And yes, we are, in a lot of ways, victimized, but we don't want to give them the power by allowing ourselves to continue in that. We need to just pick ourselves up, keep going. So here's an example of 10 spheres. That's a draconian model of the Tree of Life, where it stops at 10. So when we see that visually, unconsciously, it tells us, no, we can't go to 12. We can't go back to the avatar consciousness and reconnect with the mother, because the avatar consciousness then connects to the 13th, which is the Christ Sophia. If we look at the planetary body with the 13th gate, which is the core sun of this planet, and our ability to at least consciously connect to that higher level of consciousness, then we've restored the Tree of Life. If we look at the earth and the root system of a tree connecting to the earth and the branches connecting to our Christ consciousness, we have the circulation of the Christ Sophia, and our energy body is flowing. And so Chinese medicine that use acupuncture is to repair that distortion of how that energy flows in our body that makes us sick. But we're too busy trying to figure out gender and this and that. It doesn't matter. Whatever it takes for us to find balance, it doesn't matter who we choose to love, how we choose to do it, as long as it's not harming anybody, as long as it's consensual, and as long as hopefully, it's connected to love. Because when sexual energy is not connected to love, it's a reptilian energy that keeps us recycling. If it's Kundalini, dragon energy, that clears the chakras and connects us to 0 point, then that integration comes into the physical, and our physical begins to blossom into what real bliss feels like. And until then, it's very difficult. And so a lot of what we're taught through movies, magazines, and anything kind of growing up, the propaganda that we're given, doesn't give a crap about that. I mean, but we have a choice. I mean, you can find those, love story movies or the ones that just remind us of violence and hatred and imbalance. So again, we just have to put it upon ourselves. So when we look at the 10 spheres, that is an example of how sacred geometries and different blueprints have been given to us and not its fullest expression. And really the Tree of Life is supposed to be 10 spheres. So next slide. So 12 spheres. When you look at how each of these spheres are broken up, they're in groups of 3 that represent different harmonic universes. So we consider this world a 3D Earth, and that's only the programming, and the 3D Earth is the personality matrix. I'll get into a little bit more of that. But 5D Earth would be 4, 5, and 6. Well, what do these numbers mean? Well, 4th chakra, 5th, 6th, it's getting into empowering those zones. Obviously, in this 3D world, we use all those chakras, but what's the difference between a 5D experience and a 3D experience while still utilizing these chakras? Well, if our 5th chakra is blocked and distorted and running from mind control, the words that we speak to each other are going to emulate those programmings, and then we're not really going to get along. It's kind of like, we either uplift people and help heal each other and say wonderful things to one another, or we say things that emulate a programming that can bring each other down. Where we walk away just like, oh my God, I can't believe it. That just, can't believe they said that to me. Or it just reminds you of a trigger of your, maybe a programming that your parents are carrying. But yes, we utilize all these chakras, but what's happened to them? So when we look at the inner work, we want to purify these energy centers. We want to turn the 5th chakra into something that creates alchemy. That when we speak, the frequency and tone and codes that we carry in our voice actually purifies toxicity around us, actually makes somebody smile, actually helps them to have a better day. Or we can keep it all locked in the duality and in the programmings and be self-centered and arrogant and self-serving and self-righteous or whatever. Or even like, I'm not good enough and I suck. kind of stuff. And so there's always something to heal. And it's very, very often as humans, we swing from one extreme to the other. It's very hard to find that middle ground. And the most important thing is, you know, we let go of the world of appearances because that keeps us in the 3D program. What will they think? What if I wear slippers to the grocery store? Well, at least you're wearing shoes. Who gives a shit?
I want to thank Doc Skinner again for allowing us to share this insight from Laura Eisenhower. If you want to watch the full entire cut, the 2-hour cut is on Doc Skinner's channel, 1028 Productions. The link is below. Everybody be safe out there. Appreciate everybody on the chat for joining us and all the support. You guys rock. Be safe out there. Blake Cousins. We'll see you real soon.